And I'd like to talk now about what is non-classical congenital adrenal hyperplasia and why is it so often misdiagnosed for PCOS or polycystic ovarian syndrome. Non-classical congenital adrenal hyperplasia mimics PCOS. So if you do know all the symptoms for PCOS, that unwanted facial hair from the excess testosterone, the insulin resistance, the cysts on your ovaries. So when you have polycystic ovarian syndrome, you assume, okay, the cysts are caused from the ovaries. But that is where this disorder is completely different. The cysts form because the testosterone being produced is not from the ovaries, it is from the adrenal gland, which is completely treated differently. So if you are given medication for PCOS, it will not work if your underlying issue is NCCAH. What I'd like to discuss now is basically, as I was told from my doctor medically, how this is wreaking havoc on your body if you do have non-classical congenital adrenal hyperplasia. Left untreated, it's in the adrenal gland, it's a mutation, and as I understand it from Dr. Sharif, the path to make cortisol is where this mutation occurs. So if you don't have cortisol, you die. And obviously with the mutation and this non-life-threatening form of CAH, we survive fine, our numbers are fine, and that the numbers I refer to are the adrenal cortisol numbers. It shows that you're making cortisol. But the problem is, if you have the mutation and on those pathway to make the cortisol, I just want you to think of a straight line. If you have the straight line, and that's a normal pathway with a normal adrenal gland, it just easily comes down the line, makes cortisol. Think of the mutation as a zigzag. So the adrenal gland has to go through this big zigzag, and that's the best way I can describe it, to get to the point of making cortisol. In doing that, the word hyperplasia, just think of hyperactive, the adrenal gland is working overtime to produce the cortisol. Now, it makes the numbers for the cortisol okay, but because it's working overtime, everything else like the testosterone, the estrogen level, the salt retaining, I'm not sure of that name, so I don't want to say it incorrectly, but that actually comes from the adrenal gland. So back to those swollen feet and ankles that I've always had to deal with, the salt was holding in my body double time because the adrenal gland was working double time. Also, when you have the testosterone pumping out, you do get that excess facial hair. You do get the cysts on your ovaries because you're not being able to ovulate either properly or, like myself, no ovulation whatsoever. There was too much of a mutation. Now, I do want to discuss that mutations vary from person to person. Because this is such a new disorder that really we're just on the brink of learning about, there's so much that still has to be discovered. But what I am finding is if I have the mutation and my mutation is maybe kind of bad because I have all these terrible symptoms, somebody else might not have any symptoms. But it doesn't necessarily mean that they don't need treatment, because at some point, if stress levels raise, that causes a response with cortisol production. And the problem is, if you're not responding correctly to stress, this disorder can become active in somebody that's not symptomatic. So that's basically the underlying difference between PCOS and non-classical congenital adrenal hyperplasia. PCOS, the testosterone, and all of the cysts and everything in the testosterone in your facial hair and the cystic acne, all of that is coming from the ovaries. In this case, with non-classical, it is strictly coming from the adrenal gland. I would like to take a moment now and address the ethnic groups and the general population that can be affected with non-classical congenital adrenal hyperplasia. Anybody can be affected, but as it breaks down right now to the understanding, and keep in mind this is just the current information, and I'm sure as time goes on we'll have updates on these numbers, but with Eastern European Jewish or Ashkenazi Jewish, it is 1 out of 27. That is the most common mutation ethnic group that is affected. Second to that, Hispanic or Latino is 1 out of 40 can be affected with this. With Italians, it's 1 in 300. Yugoslavs as well. And they say in the general population, Caucasians, any other ethnic group is 1 in 1,000. So even if you haven't been diagnosed with PCOS, and I'm going to name some symptoms, if you feel like you have these symptoms and it's worth possibly getting a simple blood DNA test to confirm, definitely do so. To sum up now, I'd like to just go over a list of symptoms. Starting with the polycystic ovarian syndromes where you have the cysts around the ovaries. I mean, that's completely identifiable from an ultrasound. From there, we have the unwanted body hair, also unwanted facial hair, cystic acne, whether it be on the face. The chin is usually a hormonal area, and really bad sometimes on the back or shoulders. Skin tabs, those annoying skin tabs, are also a symptom, I have now learned. So with treatment, all of these things are going to, over time, just lessen until non-existent. There is something called, and I hate this term, but a buffalo hump is how they call it, and that's on the back of your neck, or actually on the top of your shoulders. It's like a little curvature, a hump, and if you have that or hold excess fluid, that is very much a symptom of non-classical congenital adrenal hyperplasia, along with darkened lines on the neck where the skin, where the crease is, or the knuckles, or even the wrist. So these are very specific symptoms. Now, irregular periods, you can have a period, a regular period, you can have healthy pregnancies, and you can also have this mutation. But usually, infertility, which accompanies irregular periods or non-existent periods, are definitely a major symptom of both PCOS and also NCAH. So if you have any additional questions on what may or may not be a symptom, please feel free to email us at Eileen@notpcos.com. Thank you.